I talk so much about Tesla that I thought I would do a quick video about some things I've been thinking about with respect to the company and its chart in particular. And I want to go at this at a oblique way by talking about Apple first, because I know Apple's history quite well. I've done documentaries about it. I worked there. I've read about them book after book. I've followed them since 1982, I think. So I know what I'm talking about. And back in the 80s and the 90s, this is what Apple's chart looked like. Kind of a boom and bust sort of thing. I mean, there were instances like in kind of the desktop publishing boom and the internet bubble, where the company went up hundreds of percent. But, you know, it would lose that eventually. So, you know, when they came public, it was the hottest thing in the world and it just did nothing but fall. So it had a lot of ups and downs. So looking at the first 20 years of the company's history, it wasn't that impressive. I mean, it looked like they came public on a split adjusted basis around 13 cents or so. And 22 years later, they were, you know, like up 90% or something. Being up 90% over 20 years for a high-tech new company, that's not very good. So it's kind of a dog. And it's not like Steve Jobs saved them instantly. Steve Jobs came back and for a while looked like their salvation, but I'm sure by here, they're like, maybe this guy isn't what he's cracked up to be. That was when it was at 20 cents. We all know all too well what happened afterwards, because basically I was down here and a complete shift took place, which 20 years after that, it still hasn't stopped. I'll hide all these drawn objects so it's easier to see. You know, Apple has just been a monster ever since. You know, yes, it's kind of catching its breath right now, but on the whole, this has just been the monster of monsters. It's become the world's largest company, I think next to Aramco, which I don't really consider a company. It's just basically a big ass bunch of oil. But here we have Apple, and everything changed around 2002, and they've really never looked back. In the year 2040, you know, this might look like Tesla. I joke about Cathie Wood, but she could be absolutely right. These crazy projections she has. But in the immediate term, regarding Tesla, you know, I think it's got a different history to it. And I think what's going to happen in the next several years is going to be a very big deal, particularly and specifically what happens around here, around $100. Because if you review the history of Tesla, we can see that, you know, it started off kind of slow and steady wins the race, you know, nothing thrilling, but basically just kind of slowly and carefully working its way higher, with, you know, slightly higher highs and slightly higher lows. And then it went to this first craze back in 2013, and then went into a slumber, years and years and years. In fact, it's rather remarkable. If you look here, from September 2013 until June of 2019, so that's over 6 years, the price change, zero. Nothing. This is Tesla we're talking about. Over 6 years, nothing. Isn't that amazing? And then this happened. Now this is when Elon became the most famous person on the planet, you know, because the stock went from, on a split adjusted basis, like basically $10 to 400. And he became the richest man in the world and da-da-da-da-da. Then we topped out. And of course, famously, the stock crumbled from November 2021 down to the bottom. It seems like eons ago, but really just weeks ago. It lost, you know, about 80% of its value. And since then, it's pretty much doubled. So instead of losing 80% of its value, it's down, you know, like, you know, 55% or something. But here's what I'm thinking. I think three things, I suppose. Thing one, I believe that this overhead supply is going to be incredibly hard to get through. It is not unconquerable over the long haul, but I think that everything above $200 is going to be a 12-foot thick concrete wall. Thing two, I believe, is that the descent from 200 back to around 100 would be pretty easy. If you had a market which in general was falling, if this fever breaks that started just a month ago in the whole equity market, the path from 200 to 100 would be a real slippery slide, and people would start to get really pissed off at Tesla. So that's the easy part. I think that the recognition of the overhead supply is easy. I think the notion that it could fall back to 100 is easy. What ain't easy at all is what happens then. Now, Attila, Mr. X Trends, has said like, this thing's going to be like ARK. It's going to fall to $12 or something. I don't think so myself, but nothing's impossible. It's all about this level. If Tesla does break 100, then I think the company is in staggeringly terrifying trouble on multiple dimensions. And it could indeed fall back down to, 30. Because there ain't nothing holding it up. I mean, nothing. This was very swift. There ain't nothing holding it up. However, with a capital H, if it never reaches 100, or if it finds tremendous stability in the low 100s and kind of brushes itself off, and I'm talking over the course of the next year, then it's got every reasonable chance to have another go at this. And if it does, double bottom, or even not even get close back to 100, the company could have the kind of multi-year and even multi-decade thriving that I just pointed out with Apple. And I'll close by saying that I believe that whether or not, what happens at the inflection point will be indicative of the entire world, essentially, of assets. It seems ridiculous to take one niche car company and make it into the entire planet's economy, but I am. If this cracks 100 and just starts sinking 90s, 80s, 70s, etc., I think you're going to see an entire world that is just falling to pieces in the financial scene. That would be a very bad sign. So I'll just leave it at that. Tesla, if you're on Mars and we're only providing information on a single stock, I think Tesla's the one you'd want to follow. That would tell you everything you need to know. And I will leave it at that. And, in a couple of years, we'll look back at this video and maybe we'll laugh, maybe we'll cry. But that's what I've got to say.